Section 33 of All About Coffee. This is a Librivox recording. All Librivox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit librivox.org. Read by Prajakta. All About Coffee by William Ukers. The Production and Consumption of Coffee, Part 3. Coffee drinking in the United States. Is the United States using more coffee than formerly, allowing for the increase in population? Of course, there are sporadic increases in particular years and groups of years, and they may indicate to the casual observer that our coffee drinking is mounting rapidly. And then there is the steadily growing import figure, double what it was within the memory of a man still young. But the apparent growth in any given year is a matter of comparison with a nearby year, and there are declines as well as jumps. And as for the gradual growth, it must always be remembered that according to the Census Bureau, some 1,400,000 more people are born into this country every year or enter its ports than are removed by death or emigration. At the present rate, this increase would account for about 17 million pounds more coffee each year than was consumed in the year before. The question is, do Mr. Citizen or Mrs. Citizen or the little citizens growing up into the coffee drinking age pass his or her or their respective cups along for a second pouring where they used to be satisfied with one? Or do they take a cup in the evening as well as in the morning? Or do they perhaps have it served to them at an afternoon reception where they used to get something else? In other words, is the coffee habit becoming more intensive as well as more extensive? There are plenty of very good reasons why it should have become so in the last 25 or 30 years. For the improvements in distributing, packing, and preparing coffee have been many and notable. It is a far cry these days from the times when the housewife snatched a couple of minutes amid 100 other kitchen duties to set a pan over the fire to roast a handful of green coffee beans and then took 2 or 3 more minutes to pound or grind the crudely roasted product into coarse granules for boiling. For a good many years, the keenest wits of the coffee merchants, not only of the United States but of Europe as well, have been at work to refine the beverage as it comes to the consumer's cup, and their success has been striking. Now the consumer can have his favorite brand, not only roasted but packed airtight to preserve its flavor, and made up, moreover, of growths brought from the four corners of the earth and blended to suit the most exacting taste. He can buy it already ground, or he can have it in the form of a soluble powder. He can even get it with the caffeine element 99% removed. It is preserved for his use in paper or tin or fiber boxes with wrappings whose attractive designs seem to add something in themselves to the quality. Instead of the old coffee pot, black with long service, he has modern shining percolators and filtration devices with a new one coming out every little while to challenge even these. Last but not least, he is being educated to make it properly tuition free. It would be surprising with these and dozens of other refinements if a far better average cup of coffee were not produced than was served 40 years ago, and if the coffee drinker did not show his appreciation by coming back for more. As a matter of fact, the figures show that he does come back for more. We do not refer to the figures of the last 2 years, which indeed are higher than those for many preceding years, but to the only averages that are of much significance in this connection, namely those for periods of years going back half a century or more. 5 year averages back to the Civil War show increasing per capita consumption for continental United States. 5-year per capita consumption figures. 5-year period per capita. 1867-71 6.38, 72 to 76 7.03, 77 to 81 7.53, 82 to 86 9.09, 87 to 91 8.07, 92 to 96 8.63, 97 to 1901 10.52, 1902 to 1906 11.50, 1907 to 1911 10.21, 1912 to 16 10.02, 1917 to 21 11.39. It will be seen that the gain has been a decided one, fairly steady but not exactly uniform. In the 50 years, John Doe has not quite come to the point where he hands up his cup for a second helping and keeps a meaningful silence. Instead, he stipulates, don't fill it quite full. Fill it about 5/6 as full as it was before. That is a substantial gain, and one that the next 50 years can hardly be expected to duplicate in spite of the efforts of our coffee advertisers, our inventors, and our vigorous importers and roasters. The most striking feature of this 50-year growth was the big step upward in 1897, when the per capita rose 2 pounds over the year before and established an average that has been pretty well maintained since. Something of the sort may have taken place again in 1920 when there was a 3-pound jump over the year before. It will be interesting to see whether this is merely a jump or a permanent rise, whether our coffee trade has climbed to a hilltop or a plateau. In this connection, it should be noted that the government's per capita coffee figures apply only to the continental United States, and that in computing them all the various items of trade of the non-contiguous possessions, not counting the Philippines, whose statistics are kept entirely separate from those of the United States proper, are carefully taken into account. But for the benefit of students of coffee figures, it should be added that this method does not result in a final figure, except for 1 year in 10. The reason is that between censuses, the population of the country is determined only by estimates, and these estimates by the US Bureau of the Census are based on the average increase in the preceding census decade. The increase between 1910 and 1920, for instance, is divided by 120, the number of months in the period, and this average monthly increase is assumed to be the same as that of the current year and of other years following 1920. Until new figures are obtained in 1930, the monthly increase will continue to be estimated at the same rate as the increase from 1910 to 20, or about 118,000. This figure will be used in computing the per capita coffee consumption. But when the 1930 figures are in, it may be found that the estimates were too low or too high, and the per capita figures for all intervening years will accordingly be subject to revision. This will not amount to much, probably 5/100ths of a pound at most. But it is evident that between 1920 and 30, all per capita consumption figures issued by the government are to be considered as provisional to that extent at least. In the 1920 statistical abstract, the government has revised its per capita coffee and tea figures to conform to actual instead of estimated population figures between 1910 and 1920, with the result that these figures are slightly different from those published in previous editions of the abstract. Figures from 1890 to 1910 have also been slightly changed as they were originally computed by using population figures as of June 1st, whereas It is desirable to have computations based on July 1st estimates to make them conform to present per capita figures. Reviewing the 1921 trade in the United States. According to the latest available foreign trade summaries issued by the government, the United States bought more coffee in 1921 than in any previous calendar year of our history, although the total imports did not quite reach the highest fiscal year mark. Our purchases passed the 1920 mark by more than 40 million pounds and were higher than those of 2 years ago by 3,500,000 pounds. But this record was made only in actual amounts shipped, as the value of imported coffee was far below that of immediately preceding years. Coffee values, however, fell off less than the average values for all imports, the decrease for coffee being 43% and for the country's total imports 52%. Exports of coffee were somewhat less in quantity than in 1920 and about the same as in 1919, although the value, like that of imports, was considerably less than in either previous year. Re-exports of foreign coffee were considerably below the 1920 mark in both quantity and value, and indeed were less than in several years. The amount of tea re-exported to foreign countries was only about half that shipped out in 1920, showing a continuation of the tendency of the United States to discontinue its services as a middleman, which raised the through traffic in tea several million pounds during the dislocation of shipping. Actual figures of amounts and values of gross coffee imports for the 3 calendar years 1919 to 1921 have been as follows. This represents a gain of 3 and 3/10% over 1920 in quantity and of only about 1/5 of 1% over 1919. The decrease in value in 1921 was 43% from the figures for 1920 and 45% from those of 1919. Domestic exports of coffee, mostly from Hawaii and Puerto Rico, amounted to 34,572,967 pounds, valued at $5,895,606, as compared with 36,757,443 pounds, valued at 9,803,574 in the calendar year 1920, or a decrease of 6% in quantity and 40% in value. In 1919, domestic exports were 34,351,554 pounds, having a value of $8,816,581, practically the same in quantity but showing a falling off of 33% in value. Re-exports of foreign coffee amounted to 36,804,684 pounds in 1921, having a value of $3,911,847, a decline of 25% from the 49,144,691 pounds of 1920 and of 54% from the 81,129,691 pounds of 1919. Whereas, in point of value, there was a decrease of 56% from 1920, which was $9,037,882, and of 88% from that of 1919, which was $16,815,468. The average value per pound of the imported coffee, according to these figures, works out at little more than half that of either 1920 or 1919, illustrating precipitate drop of prices when the depression came on. The pound value in 1921 was 10.6 cents, for 1920 19.4 cents, and for 1919 19.5 cents. These values are derived from the valuations placed on shipments at the point of export. The foreign valuation, for which the much discussed American valuation is proposed as a substitute. They accordingly do not take into account costs of freight, insurance, etc. It is interesting to note that the average valuation of 10.6 cent a pound for coffee shipped during the calendar year is a substantial drop from 13.12 cents a pound that was average for the fiscal year 1921, showing that the decline in values continued during the last half of the calendar year. Coffee imports in 1921 continued to run in about the same well-worn channels as in previous years, according to the figures showing the trade with the producing countries. The United States, as heretofore, drew almost its whole supply from its neighbors on this side of the globe, the countries to the south furnishing 97% of the total entering our ports. The three chief countries of South America contributed 85%, and the share of Brazil alone was 62 and 5/10%. Brazil's progress to her normal pre-war position in our coffee trade is rather slow, although she continues to show a gain in percentage each year. Formerly, we obtained 70% to 75% of our coffee from that country, but war conditions diverting nearly all of Central America's production to our ports reduced the proportion to almost half. In 1919, this had risen to 59%. In 1920, it was somewhat over 60%, and in 1921, it attained a mark of 62 and 5/10%. The actual amount shipped, which was 839,212,388 pounds, having a value of 77,186,271 was about 7% higher than in 1920, which was 785,810,689 pounds, valued at 148,793,593, and about the same percent higher than that of 1919, 787,312,293 pounds, valued at 160,038,196. Although the actual poundage showed an increase, it will be noted that the value fell off almost one half as compared with 1920 and more than one half as compared with the year before. The real feature of the year, and perhaps the most interesting development in the coffee trade of this country in recent years, is the steady advance of Colombian coffee. In the year before the war, we obtained from our nearest South American neighbor 87,176,477 pounds of coffee, valued at $11,381,675, which was about 10% of our total imports. In 1919, the first year after the war, this amount was almost doubled, being 150,483,853 pounds with a value of $30,425,162. In 1920, there was a further increase to 194,682,616 pounds, valued at $41,557,669, and in 1921 the high mark of 249,123,356 pounds, valued at $37,322,305, was reached. This was a gain of 28% over 1920 shipments, and although the value was less than in the year before, the decrease was only 10% in a year when the average fall in value was 43%. It will be news to many people interested in the coffee trade that the value of Colombian coffee, now imported into the United States, is almost half the value of the Brazilian coffee, $37 million as compared with $77 million. The number of pounds imported is a little less than one third the Brazilian contribution, but at the present rate of increase, it will pass the half mark in a few years. Colombia and Venezuela together now supply considerably more than half as much coffee as Brazil in value and more than one third as much in quantity. The average value of Colombian coffee in 1921 was about 15 cents a pound as compared with 11 cents for Venezuelan, 9 cents for Brazilian, 10 cents for Central American, and 10 and 6 tenths cents for total coffee imports. Shipments from Venezuela showed a drop in quantity of 9% as compared with 1920 imports being 59,783,303 pounds valued at $6,798,709. In 1920, they were 65,970,954 pounds, valued at $13,802,995, and in 1919, they were 109,777,831 pounds, valued at $23,163,071. The figures relating to imports from Central America are of interest as showing to what extent we are continuing to hold the trade of the war years when nearly all coffee shipped from that region came to the United States. Although there was probably been a considerable swing back to the trade with Europe, the 1921 figures show that a large percent of the trade that this country gained during the war is being retained. Imports in 1921 were considerably lower than in 1920 or in 1919, but were still more than 3 times as heavy as in 1913, the last year of normal trade. The displacement of Central America's trade by the war and the extent to which it has so far returned to old channels are illustrated in the table of imports into the United States from Central America in the last 9 years on page 301. As Germany was very prominent in pre-war trade, it is likely that more and more coffee will be diverted from the United States as German imports gradually increase to their old level. Imports from Mexico in 1921 were greater by 38% than in 1920, but were less than in 1919 and were still much below the normal trade before the war. The total was 26,895,034 pounds, having a value of $3,475,122 as compared with 19,519,865 pounds valued at $3,873,217 in the year before, and with 29,567,469 pounds valued at $5,434,884 in 1919. The imports in 1913 were more than 40 million pounds, in 1914 more than 43 million pounds, and in 1915 more than 52 million pounds. West Indian coffees showed a gradual settling back to pre-war figures, which ranged from 3 million to 12 million pounds annually, but which in 1918, the last year of the war, leaped to 52 million pounds. In 1919, they amounted to 42,013,841 pounds valued at $7,575,051 and in 1920 fell to 29,204,674 pounds valued at $5,711,993. In 1921, they continued to drop, their total being 15,398,073 pounds, valued at $1,518,784, a decrease of 47.3% in quantity. The year under review showed practically a return to normal for importations from Aden, which up to 1917 ran about 3 million pounds a year. In that year, the full effects of the war were felt in the Aden district, and shipments of coffee to this country dropped to 187,817 pounds. They rose to 432,000 pounds in 1918 and in 1919 to 681,290 pounds, valued at $141,391. In 1920, there was a further rise to 889,633 pounds, valued at $200,505, and in 1921 they amounted to 2,799,824 pounds, valued at $476,672. But this trade is of little importance compared with that of the producing countries of this hemisphere, being less than 1% of our total imports. Imports from the Dutch East Indies continue to decline, being 55% less than in 1920. They total of 12,438,016 pounds, however, valued at 1,777,602 is still 2 or 3 times the normal pre-war importation. Exports of coffee in 1921: 33,389,805 pounds of green coffee, valued at 5,590,318 pounds, and 1,183,162 pounds of roasted, valued at $305,288, were about the same as those of the year before in quantity, although much lower in value. The 1920 shipments were 34,785,574 pounds, valued at $9,223,966 of green coffee, and 1,971,869 pounds of roasted, valued at $579,608. In the re-export trade, shipments of coffee were lower than in several years. Total amounts for 1921, 1920 and 1919 being 36,804,684 pounds, 49,144,091 pounds, and 81,129,641 pounds, and total values 3,911,847, $9,037,882, and $16,815,468. Re-exports to France fell off from 16,760,977 pounds in 1920 to 11,429,952 in 1921. Mexico took 3,236,245 pounds as compared with 9,892,7 639 in the previous year, and Cuba also reduced her purchases from 6,319,105 pounds to 2,831,109. Shipments to Denmark, 4,099,403 pounds, were practically the same as in 1920. 3,951,166 pounds, as were also those to Germany, 3,200,158 pounds as compared with 2,917,773 in 1920. In the trade of the two coffee exporting possessions of the United States, Hawaii and Puerto Rico, the 1921 figures show a considerable increase in shipments from Hawaii to continental United States and to foreign countries, while exports from Puerto Rico fell off slightly. Hawaii in 1921 sent 803,905 pounds valued at $123,347 to foreign countries, which compared with 687,597 pounds valued at $200,180 in the year before, and 4,183,046 valued at $650,036 to continental United States, as against 1,885,703 pounds valued at $476,033 in the previous year. Puerto Rico's crop, as usual, furnished the bulk of the domestic exports of the United States to foreign countries. 29,546,348 pounds, valued at $5,027,741, as against 1920 exports of 31,321,415 pounds, valued at 8,455,908. Shipments from Puerto Rico to continental United States amounted to 211,531 pounds, valued at $35,780, as against 418,127 pounds, valued at $118,663 in 1920. Per capita consumption of coffee in continental United States showed a slight increase during the calendar year 1921 over that of 1920, the figure being 12.09 pounds as against 11.70 for the previous year. This calendar year figure compares with the fiscal year figure of 12.21 pounds, indicating that imports during the last half of 1920 were somewhat heavier than during the last half of 1921. End of section 33.